Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237 and coming at you with yet another Blumhouse review. Wasn't sure if I was going to do this because it wasn't produced by Jason Blum, but it was released through Blumhouse, or Jason Blum. So I was, well, there's a difference between him producing it and just being released by his company. But it did have the Blumhouse opening in the beginning. Just like the film I watched before this, which I'll do at some point, it didn't have the Blumhouse opening. And it wasn't produced by him, but it was released through the company. But this one I'm doing is Family Blood. I figured I watched it, so why not? It still felt like a Blumhouse film. Directed by Sonny Malley, if I pronounce that correctly. He directed another film called Hurt, which, again, released through Blumhouse. That's a slasher film from 2018. I'll be checking that out if I can. And his first film was Anguish, which has nothing to do with Blumhouse, but it is a horror film. Basically, why, you're probably at, again, in case you missed my last couple reviews, why, if I hate Blumhouse, why am I going through these? Well, because I want to do a top 10 best and worst Blumhouse films. And there is a bunch on Netflix. I do have a list of ones I'm getting to, so you don't have to recommend any. And because I was thinking about it, and I was like, even though I hate Blumhouse, and I say I hate Blumhouse, there's still some gems in there. Invisible Man, Hush, Get Out, even Insidious. But for every one of those, there's a dozen Paranormal Activities, Ouijas, whatever. So I checked out both 13 Sins and this film, and I figured I'd do this film first. It's more because it's more recent in my mind. 13 Sins kind of stuck with me more. There's really not much I can say about this film. I mean, it just feels like any other. I mean, some parts are kind of imaginative and fun, and kind of well, that's a neat idea. It's a vampire movie, but they play with the conventions of what it is to be a vampire. Like, it opens up with this guy. We see his POV at point. It opens up like this cheerleader looking for her parents. We hear a voice. We kind of see him from behind, but we don't see him until he takes his fake teeth out to reveal rotten vampire teeth. But then we cut to now, which has, we follow our lead character played by Vanessa Shaw, who I guess she was in Hocus Pocus. I didn't grow up with that. I'm sorry. But she was also in the Hills Have Eyes remake. She was the oldest sister, the one that got shot in the head. Horror, thriller, clinical. She was in Eyes Wide Shut. She is a recovering addict, I'm guessing of opiates. She said pills. She talked about how she lost her kids. Her husband left her. She lost her kids. She has her kids now. She has a troublemaking older son and a 13-year-old younger daughter. The older son acts out a lot, and I believe the son, Colin Ford, I guess he was in Under the Dome, which I never watched. He was in Supernatural. I want to say he wasn't, but I could have swore he was the older brother in the film Found from 2014, which is a good movie. I got to see the spin-off Headless, which is kind of hard to find. He pulls the fire alarm, he acts out. He draws really morbid sketches. His sister does more comic-y art. They both deal with her addiction differently. And then one night, after a meeting, she comes across this guy played by James Ransone, who was the adult Eddie in It Chapter 2. He was Deputy So-and-so in both Sinister films. I like him as an actor. He talks about how he doesn't come out and say he's an addict. He talks about what he is in a very vague way. She's walking home. This younger kid that was at a meeting, he offers her these really strong pills. Since she's struggling, she takes them. She's ODing essentially at a park. And then, of course, we get the idea he's the vampire. Spoilers. He pretty much turns her into a vampire in a number of ways. He doesn't bite her. One, he does kill the pill kid. He does something to her, and then she's walking to her car. She hits her head. He sort of sucks the blood out. He kind of snaps her neck. But then when he sucks the blood out, she comes to. And it's like she's slowly becoming a vampire, and it's her dealing with it. Her kids suspecting that she's off the wagon again. And, I mean, the acting was fair. I didn't mind the acting, whether it be Vanessa Shaw, Colin Ford, the older son, even the younger daughter. James Ransone, he did fine. Again, I like him. But it does play with the conventions because he does, a number of times, he does talk about whether he's talking to her or the son. He's like, are you going to let me in? You going to invite me inside? There is a part when they first go out to coffee together. We see there's such an angle. They're sitting by the window. We can see their reflection, but he doesn't have one. This is before she even knows anything's going on. Before anything even happens to her, I think. He talks about how, I might be the only one that can talk to you. You might be the only one that can help me. And several times he talks about, are you going to invite me in? Are you going to let me in? Playing on the convention of vampires can't enter a home unless they're invited. Of course, that does get... a lot of vampire things get trumped in this. Because he, eventually the son picks up on what's going on. Like, she gets these bags under her eyes. She can't drink coffee. She can't take her pills. She can't ingest anything but blood. And when she sees blood, she has to go for it. And these are fast-moving vampires. I mean, there's a part where she sees the neighbor's cat, and it's like this fast, animalistic kind of attack. Whenever she does try to ingest something, she gets sick at home, which is why they think she's using again. The son starts picking up on, okay, this might be a vampire, so he starts to put it all together. Because he's walking home, he steps on a thing with a nail, punctures his foot, and he leaves bloody footprints, and he sees her licking it off the floor. And that's when it felt kind of fast for how he put it all together. But James Ransone is at the door, and he keeps saying, are you going to let me in? You going to invite me in? He's like, what, you can't come? He's like, he either questions it or he says, right, because you can't come in unless I invite you. And then he just walks right past him. He's like, no, I was just being polite. So I thought that was kind of interesting about how it keeps the no reflection and the stake through the heart and stuff like that. The having to decapitate them. But it fucks with the whole having to be invited in and the garlic. Because there was a point where he grabs the son's backpack and he sniffs it and he kind of laughs like, garlic. He does throw the son around to kind of show dominance. Even the son's holding a knife and he grabs it. Oh, that's another thing. They can heal very fast. It has that in there too. Then he throws him over the railing. He's like, for future reference, the knife doesn't work. And of course, he also puts it together because when the neighbor comes by looking for her cat, she kills her because the neighbor wants to look in the basement. It's, I feel like it's trying to be allegorical, going from one addiction to another, and that's sort of how James Ransom's character acts. Tries telling her how, he gives her the whole "it gets easier" speech, pretty much trading one addiction for another. It does kind of show being a vampire as struggling with addiction. So I thought that was interesting. As a film, even though it went to those areas, the film as a whole didn't really feel that inspired because, I mean, there is a part where, oh, also the daylight thing, because she can go out in daylight and he looks at the sun, he's like, the daylight thing is also a myth. So I like how it, it became its own vampire film. It addressed all the tropes and cliches, which I like. It didn't just do its own thing. I like how it addressed it, and it's like, not the case with us. It's not real. So again, I like that it did that. Those are probably the most interesting parts of the film, and when she is vampiring out, it is the most interesting. But and again, the guy vampire and the son, their acting was fine. The end, I thought, went a little bit longer because, he does kill the vampire with the stake, and he's like, the stake works. And then he decapitates him. And then, his supposed girlfriend comes over. The mom's gonna bite her, and he's like, no, don't. And she pushes her away. But since she's super strong, pushes her into the stake. She dies. She's like, I can bring her back, but she's going to be like me. And you get the idea that she hates her affliction. She's like, no one deserves to be like this. So he lets her die. And then the daughter comes up and kills the mother because they're hugging and she won't let go. She wants to bite him. So the daughter kills her. Then the son stabs himself in the wrist to drip blood in her mouth to help her. He falls down. And then the camera kind of shows him, and you think he's dying, just kind of opens his eyes. I would have liked the ending better if it was left ambiguous. If it was like, well, is he fine? Did she somehow afflict him? Did something happen? But it didn't. It goes on for another scene about, we get shots of the town, her voiceover with a new name, talking about how, talking like she's at another meeting, talking about addiction, the same way he did earlier. And then we see her rotten vampire teeth putting new ones on. False teeth on. So I thought it ended too late. I would have liked the ambiguity. And I mean, the ambiguity of the son, I guess, is still there. But I would have liked it better if it ended there. I mean, it felt boring at times. I mean, all the scenes that link it together is kind of boring. But when you get the vampire scenes, it's interesting. It's interesting how they played with the whole having to be invited in, the daylight. They address all the vampire tropes. Even a scene where she looks at herself in the mirror and she sees her reflection go away. So it really does address everything vampire. I'm guessing it's called Family Blood because the only real blood she has, if she wanted it, would have been her kids. But again, I liked the acting. Even though the story didn't feel like anything new, we've seen movies about people turning into vampires before, as opposed to just vampires being the threat. But I thought it was interesting how it treated it like an addiction, trading one addiction for the other, treating the lust for, not lust, but the quench and hunger for blood as an addiction and having to treat it that way. How it addressed and debunked some of the tropes and cliches of vampires, so it really made it its own film. So I give it props for that. But overall, just compared to the really bad Blumhouse films and the good Blumhouse films, this one feels really in the middle. I mean, it's not bad at all, but it's not, because when Blumhouse makes a good movie, it's usually pretty great and stand out. You know, even ones like the Belko Experiment. It's not a great movie, but it's entertaining as fucking hell, as all hell. This really just felt like a middle of the road, just kind of, it is what it is kind of movie. Nothing special. I mean, I don't really have anything negative to say other than the linking scenes were kind of boring. And the pacing was kind of off. The score, there was some memorable parts of the score. This film is kind of forgettable. I am forgetting some things and what scenes had the good score put to them. But by no means is it a bad movie. I mean, it's on Netflix. If you like vampires and you want to see one that approaches it kind of differently, it's worth checking out. Some people call it a thriller. I see why it appears that way, but it's a horror film. But yeah, Family Blood, it had its moments of entertainment, intrigue, and interest. Acting was good. I would just say the pacing and some of the linkage scenes, the filler scenes, were kind of boring. And at the ending, it had that sort of epilogue scene wasn't really needed. That ambiguity would have been fine. But yeah, that's Family Blood, so thank you for watching.